I think so. I think that the way people feel about this administration is the mere fact that he talks about New Orleans and the need to help folks in need here in New Orleans is a step beyond what the past administration has done. I mean, we had President Bush sat in Jackson Square with a light bank and generator set up and said, just after the storm, that he was going to give level 5 hurricane protection to the city. And everyone here knew that that was impossible, but the mere fact that he said that, and then there was no real follow-up with that, and it seemed to us here on the ground that when possible, there was an avoidance of the issues here in New Orleans. At least this administration talks about them.
Okay, so Tom, you're satisfied with this period of time before President Obama visited New Orleans as president. Let's talk about the amount of time he will spend in the city. He's going to be there for 4 hours, and some local Republicans have said, you know what, that is just not long enough. Let's pull up a quote for you. This is from Representative Steve Scalise, who says, there's a big difference between campaigning here as a political candidate and spending quality time here as the president. The people of New Orleans deserve more than a drive-through daiquiri summit with the president. Interesting phraseology there. Thomas, let me ask you whether you think this is just a drive-through daiquiri or a more substantive and satisfying visit.
Well, first, I hope that your viewers recognize what a drive-through daiquiri moment is. We actually do sell daiquiris at drive-through lanes here in New Orleans. Okay, the Republicans have just found a new stick with which to beat the president, and they're having fun playing with it. David Vitter, who is not here today to be with the president, has criticized him for not being on the ground longer, as have all of the Republicans. But come on, this is just politics. President Obama is a smart man. Frankly, I don't think he is not getting as much from this trip as we are getting from his presence here. The man can read the briefing papers. His cabinet secretaries have been here a lot. A lot of work is really being done. And so this is fulfilling a campaign pledge at a really difficult time for him. I mean, the president has an awful lot to do this week, this month, this year as president. And when you look at it from a national perspective, messing with Katrina isn't going to win Barack Obama any big points politically. So I'm just glad he's here for 4 hours.
Yeah, Thomas, you raise a good point there, because right now President Obama is dealing with Afghanistan and dealing with healthcare, dealing with the economy, many things, as you say, on his plate. The White House, though, has outlined some of the destinations for the $1 billion from the Recovery Act that have been allocated to New Orleans. They break it down this way, saying that this will fund almost 1,000 projects, including work on roads, bridges, Army Corps construction, schools, health centers, and more. Sandy, I want to ask you, as a writer for levees.org, about whether you are seeing these kind of promises turn into action.
Well, we do see a lot of funding coming this way. You can look around in New Orleans and see that we're not having the same sort of economic downturn as the rest of the country, because some money is finally flowing to the city. What we're concerned about, though, is the huge amount of misinformation out in America right now, and that's why my group was formed, because people don't understand why New Orleans flooded. New Orleans was not flooded by a natural disaster like Mississippi. We were flooded by civil engineering mistakes, and those were the responsibility of the federal government via the Army Corps of Engineers. And with over 55% of the American population living in counties protected by levees, just like New Orleans, it certainly behooves the country to understand that what happened in New Orleans is a national problem, is a national issue, and we should certainly make sure that that money gets spent right.
And it's very much a work in progress, as you say, Sandy. We actually have some data on how much progress has been made in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. This is data coming in from FEMA for you. As of August, 60,000 properties are still abandoned in New Orleans. 1,500 people in Louisiana are still living in temporary housing, and the Army Corps of Engineers, as you mentioned, Sandy, has not finished that $15 billion system to provide 100-year flood protection. The project's actually only a third of the way through. Thomas, I want to ask you, as you look at those statistics, are you satisfied with them? Do you think more progress is being made under the Obama administration as compared to the Bush administration?
Well, I have to believe that if Bobby Jindal is happy, our new Republican governor, with the Obama administration's actions, then he must be doing a pretty good job. And Bobby Jindal has said that the money is flowing well. There's been $1 billion of recently obligated money that had previously been appropriated but had been held up. There is a new attitude. There's certainly new professional management at FEMA, and things are generally looking good for the flow of money. As Sandy said, the money's coming in. What I'm focused on, what I would encourage others to focus on, is whether 1 in 100-year flood protection, so-called Category 3 flood protection, is really what this nation wants to provide a major city, a jewel of culture and a city on the grow. Most nations would look at Category 3 protection and say, okay, well, you're protecting cattle or sheep? And we say, no, this is a major city, and we're going to keep them from flooding if they get hit by the kind of flood that you can have, the kind of storm, once in every 100 years. That's not Category 5. That's not very much, frankly. So I think the next step for our political leaders in this state and in this city is to do our job, move people to higher ground, show that we're making our commitment for a sustainable future, but also get a bigger commitment from the federal government.
All right, I want to come back to you, Tom, in just a moment to get a sense of the optimism that Thomas was just touching on there. But let's just see what our viewers are saying in the interim. What are you hearing, Reggie?
And as I said earlier, Namwa, our Your Voice respondents are tending to be a little more negative than those who are voicing their concerns on Facebook today. Here's Joseph, who says, how can we compare a few months to a couple of years? So far, I feel President Obama is doing a good job. Many will attack him, but they will do so no matter what. Our next Facebook fan, Alex, tells us, I'm sure Obama's administration will do a good job in New Orleans, and there's no doubt that'll be better than Bush team, and his visit there today will be a great step to try to recover the city. He goes on to say good luck. And our last one says, it's too early to judge his performance on the recovery effort, but I think he's doing all the right things at the moment, which is good to see. So, again, more positive than negative comments today now on our Facebook page.
All right, Reggie, you want to see if that positivity is carrying through to the general population, to see what the mood is there. Tom, how would you describe things?
I agree that folks here on the ground are probably more upbeat than not. People are optimistic about the future. We're optimistic about our business and tourism in New Orleans in general. There are more restaurants open by some number of 200 to 250 more than were open pre-Hurricane Katrina, since Hurricane Katrina. I think people are seeing New Orleans as an opportunity to do better.
Now, Tom, you're obviously in the tourism sphere. That is an area of the economy in New Orleans that has done better than some others, rebounding to almost pre-Katrina levels. The construction industry has also benefited from some of the projects there. Manufacturing, though, suffering, especially as the shuttle program begins to wind down. Sandy, I'd like to ask you, if I can, what do you think it'll take for companies to want to reinvest in New Orleans and really to shore up the economy?
The answer to that would be the belief that the federal government will finally step up to the plate and build a flood protection system that will work like Holland does. And our dissatisfaction with President Obama is that he's feeding a myth by referring to the flooding in New Orleans as a natural disaster, as Katrina flooded New Orleans. And when he begins characterizing it properly, that New Orleans was flooded due to civil engineering mistakes, something that we can easily fix, then we'll get some confidence in both the American people and in businesses who will move here.
So part of President Obama's focus, obviously, on shoring up those levees, but also, Thomas, he has a focus on helping residents become self-sufficient, doing things like cutting red tape, increasing access to funds. Do you think that is the right kind of focus?
His cabinet members, Sean Donovan and Janet Napolitano, have been working very hard to do just that, and I do have to commend them. They have been on the ground in New Orleans many times. They've made a big presence, and they have worked hard to cut that red tape and get that funding. But it needs, the American people, your viewers out there, need to understand that we're not the recipients of largesse and generosity. We are the recipients of aid that we need and deserve because the protection that we trusted, built by our government, failed. And from here on in, I agree with one of our other bloggers on here today, says that we need a commitment to stronger flood protection. 100-year protection is not good enough for a major city full of people.
And Thomas, just to put that point to you about the self-sufficiency, do you believe that's the right focus?
It's important to sell what Sandy is talking about nationwide. You've got to sell it in terms of helping a community become self-sufficient. And certainly a great deal of the progress that's been made in New Orleans has in fact come about through leaders in civil society. Our elected leadership at the city level, most New Orleanians agree, has been frankly pretty poor since the storm. But a lot of leaders have emerged simply from the community. And here's a figure I want to give you that to add to those you showed from FEMA. We have roughly 70% of the population back that we had pre-Katrina, but our employment level is at 85%. So this is a city that's actually on an upward trajectory. Part of that is because of a lot of flow-through money from the federal government for rebuilding, which isn't going to stay here forever. But I'm pretty optimistic that the New Orleans that we are rebuilding is not simply the New Orleans that we had, which was a city in demographic and economic decline, but it will be a smaller, but in many ways perhaps more prosperous city in the future.
All right, Tom, I'd like to ask you if you could to wrap things up for us and just tell us, with President Obama coming to visit this afternoon and then with the White House dispatching other officials, other senior White House officials to New Orleans, what would you like to see and hear from them that would leave you satisfied?
Well, I think that everyone wants some concrete plans on what exactly is going to transpire at this point. I mean, I think that what we've seen here in New Orleans that has helped us to get to this point is the administration, the current administration, and say the university's administration and local government has done a very good job of selling the idea of volunteerism and altruistic volunteering, you know, in organizations like Habitat for Humanity have done a great deal here on the ground. But I have an employee, for instance, who lost her home in Katrina, and she just now finished the rebuilding of her home with the road home money that she was given. She was displaced and in the Superdome for 4 days. And I think that, you know, it's a smaller segment now, but there is a good deal of the population that would like to come back to New Orleans, and I think that we want to know how that's going to happen, or how the government is going to make it easier for them to get here.
Well, thank you, Tom, and we certainly hope, Thomas, that upward trajectory that you described continues to be the case. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. You've been listening to Sandy Rosenthal, the founder and director of Levees.org, Tom Schönbrunn, owner of Maison Perrier, and Thomas Langston, professor of political science at Tulane University. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure.